Salutations, listeners. Welcome to Divinely Uninspired, or as we have renamed ourselves, the DUI podcast. We haven't really renamed ourselves that. It's just...
I think you're the only one saying that, to be honest with you.
I actually had somebody say to me earlier this week, so I was listening to DUI, and I was like, oh, it's taking. So
No.
Was
it your wife?
No, it was not. She doesn't listen very often. So, but anyway, it is so good. I was going to go with I was going to quote Yoko Ono in People of Earth. How are you? That's one of my favorite salutations ever, but I just went with salutations. So we have with us, as always, is Jeremy.
Hello.
Person of Earth. How are you? Yep. And then we have Penny with us.
Hey, everyone. What was your salutation last week? It was like...
Ahoy, mateys.
Oh, yeah. No to that, too.
I haven't landed on one that I want yet. I will find it.
We hope so.
Yeah. So, because I'm picky about how we start things. And then we are excited to introduce to you on Divinely Uninspired, or the DUI podcast, Kyle Broyer. He is our new student pastor. Kyle, welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, Kyle, we're going to give you just 30 seconds to introduce yourself. Go.
My name is Kyle. I've now lived in 5 states, Kentucky, Colorado, Oregon, Missouri, and then Kansas. I love sports ball, and I love to read books.
20 seconds left.
Oh, 20 seconds. All right, cool. I got a little bit more time. I'm a huge Chiefs fan, but I'm not Patrick Mahomes. I like the Chiefs.
10 seconds.
But my uncles like to remind me that me and Patrick Mahomes are the same age, and it gets weird after that.
Did you say you like sports balls?
Yeah.
What is
sports
that?
Ball. It's just sports ball.
All different kinds of...
He's just a nerd is what he is.
Sports.
No, actually I do like sports a lot. I just like to call it sports ball because people who really like sports hate when you call it sports ball.
They do.
I've just never heard anybody call it sports
ball. I have never heard that either.
You've never heard sports ball?
No.
Wow.
I mean, I have, but I hang out with nerds.
I mean, I've heard basketball. That was a good movie.
I love that movie. It's a terrible movie, but I love it. If you're over the age of 7, go watch baseball. It's great. So the Kentucky State Fair is here. I love the fair. Jeremy, you are also a big fair fan, correct?
Yes, I do love the state fair.
I'm going on Saturday. Anybody else going anytime soon?
We're going to go next week sometime.
Yeah.
I'm going to go tomorrow.
Hard pass, guys. No.
You don't go to the fair?
What is wrong with you?
What is wrong with you?
I know. I just don't like it. There's too many people.
That's the best part.
People watching in the history of people watching.
People get on my nerves sometimes.
No.
Well, you get on my nerves.
You got to go watch
going
the
to the
people.
fair.
It's amazing what you see at the fair.
I love the fair so much. We are going to, in fact, this year we are going to try and hit some of, we never do this, but we're going to try to hit some of the shows that come through. And we were watching a video last night. There's one called the Pork Chop Review. It's of pigs that do tricks.
Yeah, I saw that last year.
Yeah, so my children are really excited about the Pork Chop Review. So, and then the Pirates of the Caribbean from Colombia is like a high wire act. We're going to go see that. And then I just love going and sitting in a chair in one of the tents, usually the Budweiser tent, and watching people walk by.
Yeah, you need to go to the Great Kentucky Cookout. That's the best tent because it's all the local Kentucky vendors.
Oh, okay. I will do that.
It's called the Great Kentucky Cookout. It's got like all things. But my favorite part is going to all the little county booths. I love doing that and like hearing like about stuff in Kentucky. I'm not a mean person, so I never feel tempted to take pictures of people when they're doing really weird things or wearing weird things. But my one exception is the state fair. I will take pictures of people all day long because it's unbelievable some of the things you see at the state fair.
Like a People of Walmart type thing?
No, yes, but
100 times worse.
Yes.
Because they all belong to us.
Yeah.
All right, so everybody, what's your favorite fair food? Penny, what's your favorite fair food? Even though you don't go to the fair, what's your favorite fair food?
I do like the lemonade shake-ups. Those are really great.
Okay.
Just a corn dog, I guess. I don't know. I don't have anything really magical to tell you. I'm sorry.
That's lame. All right.
Sorry.
That is. What are your kids? Do your kids like the fair?
Have they ever been?
Have you ever taken your kid? You've never taken your... We go 2 to 3 times a year.
You get in for like a discount or free. Don't be giving me that. You know how much money it costs to take your family to the fair?
I'm calling CPS right now.
Taylor went when she was really young, and Luke, he's like, have I ever been to the fair? I'm like, dude, you don't need to go.
No, he does.
Gosh.
You can take him. You want to take him?
I will happily take him. My mom bought me a duck one year at the fair, a little baby duck. It lasted 3 days. And then just, it literally, we were doing all the things that we were supposed to, and it just collapsed. I don't know if it was Hey,
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, don't buy ducks at the
I
fair.
had a pet duck for a year.
Yeah,
Lived in my house.
Ours didn't last.
It was terrible. It was a bad idea.
Yeah,
but
they are nasty.
They are.
So what's your favorite food, Jeremy?
Oh, I'm a traditionalist, so I love the Kentucky Pork Producers pork chop sandwich.
That's mine.
That's my favorite.
Ew.
That sauce, I would never eat that
No.
barbecue gravy sauce, but for some reason I put a little bit on there, just a little bit. It's good. I like that. I don't get into all the deep fried stuff. I tried the donut burger. It wasn't my cup of tea, but Kentucky Pork Producers pork sandwich is my go-to.
Yeah, I love that one. And Kyle, what is your general? You've never been to the Kentucky State Fair, but fair food is the same everywhere you go.
So any proud Iowan will tell you that the Clay County Fair is better than the Iowa Fair. It's a bigger deal, I guess.
I thought you were from Colorado.
No, but my dad's from Iowa, and every Iowan is very proud of the Clay County Fair. My dad grew up there. So the best thing is the Tom Thumb donut. It's like, donut holes, but on steroids.
Like Tom Thumb, like the gas station?
I don't know. It's just called Tom Thumb donuts.
Oh, okay.
I had texted my dad this morning. I was like, what are those things called? Because they can't just say donuts.
In high school, I was in a musical called State Fair that takes place at the Iowa State Fair.
Oh, it was probably the Clay County Fair. Actually.
It probably was. And the song is awful because it's our state fair is a great state fair. Don't miss it. Don't even be late from dollars to donuts. Hey, I bet it's the Tom Thumb donut.
Probably.
It probably is.
Yeah.
Well,
now, and two of my favorite secrets. If you go to the agriculture part, they have the place where they do the honey, and they sell the honey sticks from the bees that they have right there for like 10 cents for a honey stick. And then the sorghum too. I don't really like sorghum that much, but every year I go to State Fair, I get the spoonful of sorghum when you go on the producers thing.
A spoonful of sorghum helps the state
Sorghum's
fair
actually pretty good.
That does not
like
make me want to go.
You've got to go to the fair. This is a tragedy that
I think as a part of your job, working here at Journey, you're going to have to go to
We're going to do a
fair
field trip next week. We're doing a
Yes.
That's it. It's been decided. We're doing a field trip day next week to the Kentucky State Fair.
I was told it's rite of passage, and I've been here for 4 weeks now.
Yeah.
I can tell you.
We're going for 4 hours. We're going to be here early. We're going to have lunch there.
That's right.
That's what we're doing next
And
week.
Spend $40
I'm
on
gonna
lunch.
I'm gonna wear jorts with boots.
Yep.
And a cutoff T-shirt, and I will fit right in.
We are going next week.
That is actually not an exaggeration.
No, I don't doubt it.
You have no idea.
I can't wait. All right, we got a lot to talk about today, and we've got all this nonsense behind us, and only nonsense ahead. So first things first, here's our song. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're listening to Divinely Uninspired, podcast by Journey Church Shepherdsville, hosted by Jeremy Willis and me, Rusty Wilson. You can find us online at journeyshepherdsville.com. For questions or comments, email podcast@journeyshepherdsville.com. Maybe we'll feature your question or comment on a future episode. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show. All right, so we've talked a lot about our pets before in the past. All of us old timers here, I guess, because Kyle, you're new. We all have pets, but you are not a pet guy. Is that correct?
So I like pets. I don't like taking care of them, and I don't like them on my bed. So that's
so
kinda
you don't
my
like
line.
pets because that's what
No,
pets do.
I just don't like taking care of them, and I don't like them sleeping on my bed.
Okay,
We can get him one of those. What were those little keychains? The
Tamagotchis.
Tamagotchi. We'll get you a Tamagotchi.
Okay.
My daughter just bought one of those like 3 weeks ago, and she kept interest until she realized like this thing poops, and I have to clean the poop,
Yeah.
and then it died, and she was like, it's dead. I don't care.
It's a
anymore."
digital pet. It was a big deal when we were
It's
kids.
digital? Oh.
Yeah.
It's a
not
little
like a Furby.
keychain. No, not like a Furby.
No,
Forget
no.
how young he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, how old are you?
27.
27. You should still know about
Yeah, I agree.
Tamagotchis, though. All right.
I know
Well,
about Furbies.
anyway, so I have 2 dogs and many more on the way because Puppy Watch 2022 has been going on since Sunday. My Labradoodle is going to be giving birth. She may be giving birth right now. I don't know. I haven't checked on her since I left. And then Jeremy, you have your dog Charlie,
Charlie Brown.
and he is awesome. I like he makes me laugh.
A Labradoodle.
And then Penny,
Satan Smond. Yes, I have him at my home. He's the devil.
And what's his
Still
name?
alive. Peanut.
Peanut.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to ask a question. I came across this article, and it questioned whether owning pets is immoral or not. Like, is it okay to keep an animal as a pet? And honestly, it just kind of comes down to does an animal have personhood or not?
I know. Is it immoral or unethical? There's a difference between the words. So,
well, they interchange them in the article. Honestly, they talk about morality and then they talk about the ethics of it. And I don't think any of us. I mean, maybe you are. I'm not cool with animal testing and stuff like that or animal abuse, but I don't think there should be anybody super offended by owning a dog.
No. I think when I read this article, I was like, this is people really reaching for. Now, they do bring up a good point, but this is more of a consumerism thing, less a pet owning thing, how much money we spend on pets when we have all these other world problems that maybe we should spend less money on. But that's a capitalistic thing, not a moral thing. That's if they didn't create that industry where you could buy a sweater for your dog, then people wouldn't buy it. But so that's more of a capitalistic thing. But that was a good point that like we spend all this money on our pets.
Right.
That issue I do see, and I've even talked about that from the stage before. Like, if you took away what we spend, and not even like going to the vet and food, we're talking about accessories, costumes, toys for our pets. I mean, you could basically for a year take care of world hunger, clean water, all that stuff. So that does get a little bit excessive, but no, I don't think it's immoral to own a pet. I don't know.
I agree. I mean, here's my issue. The same people that talk about this are the same people that go out and have a cheeseburger and eat meat. So it's
not a lot of them. A lot of them are vegan.
They're vegans.
But to assume that an animal has the same mindset as a human is ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
Well, and we've come a long way. So they quote this book over and over again called "Run Spot Run," and in this book there's reports that in 1877 the city of New York rounded up 762 stray dogs and drowned them in the East River, shoving them into iron crates and lifting the crates by crane into water. And then veterinarian turned philosopher Bernard Rawling recalls pet owners in the 1960s putting their dogs to sleep before going on holiday, reasoning that it was cheaper to get a new dog when they returned than to board the one they had.
Well, that's just because people are terrible.
Yeah,
that has nothing to do with like people that are responsible pet owners.
I agree.
Like, yeah, that I mean, people are terrible. Like people do. I mean, yeah.
Now, I also think though that because we say like, oh, they're a member of the family, and I mean, I believe that our dogs are a member of the family, but that is somewhat unique to us in the United States, or at least in
Western culture.
Yeah. Like when I lived abroad, we there was this way to explain to us because I mean, dogs were just all over the place, and people would keep dogs solely to ward off other people. And somebody explained it like, well, imagine you have a picnic table in your backyard, and that picnic table has been a great place for memories for your family. You've had it a long time, but then, you have a storm and a branch falls and it breaks the picnic table in half. And you're like, oh, that was a great picnic table. I guess we just need to get another one. And that's the way that a lot of people in other parts of the world kind of view animals. Like, not that they don't value them, but they don't have the same value as humans.
I blame Disney. Because I think that Disney movies, when we were kids, made us think that because I do think that animals have feelings and emotions and all that. Like, I don't question that. And honestly, the question of do dogs go to heaven and all that? Well, if the Garden of Eden is an ideal of what the world was supposed to be, well, there are animals there. So who's to say there's not going to be animals in the next phase of life? I don't know. I mean, that's a question above my pay grade. We've talked about this before on the podcast.
But Adam was given dominion over the animals. So
yeah, so that's true too. But I mean, I think the idea that we think that they have personhood, that comes from watching too many animated movies as kids where dogs talk and have relationships like we do and all that stuff. I mean, I think that's the big thing of it is, was it here that we were talking about, did bugs have feelings? Was that here?
I don't know.
I got in a debate with somebody about bugs having feelings, and I was like,
no. Emotions, or like,
yeah, like emotions.
I can feel pain.
Because I stopped on a bug, and they were like, you shouldn't do that. They have feelings and emotions, and I was like, I don't think they do.
That little bug has a bug family at home.
I was like, you watched The Bug's Life, didn't you?
That's right.
Yeah. All dogs go to heaven, Jeremy.
Not all of them.
No,
it's in a movie.
I don't think yours will, based on what you say.
I know.
Peanut's going straight to hell.
This is probably true.
I had a dog named Sophie that, I mean, she was bad. I mean, we would let her, she would run away on a regular basis, and we'd always be like, well, maybe she just won't come back. I mean, that's what we would say to each other, like physically, like, I mean, that's how bad we were. But then we'd be like, no, she's going to attack some small child, and then we're going to have to pay the medical bills. So we got to go find her. But like every time she'd run away, we'd just be like, well, maybe she just won't come back. But she was a bad dog.
So when you had to make decisions about her, it was a Sophie's choice.
Yeah, there you go.
See, I'm a dad. I come up with clever puns. So let's keep talking about animals and human feelings with this next story. And I am super excited about this one because I even have a video clip that, I mean, obviously this is an audible media, so you won't be able to see it, which we'll put a link to it, but you will be able to hear.
You don't want to.
No, you do.
Okay.
I promise.
I didn't watch
So
it. I couldn't handle it.
this
No.
article by Religion News Service it's titled brilliantly, "When Mixing Faith with Furries, Things Can Get Hairy." Jeremy, you want to explain what a furry is?
No, but I do. We talked about this in the office the other day because Kyle didn't know because you would have.
I had an idea.
You would have Brody was, which is a whole different thing. So I have a feeling there's a lot of people listening right now that don't even know this world exists. But essentially, a furry is someone that dresses up as a animal, almost like in a costume or like a mascot. But I mean, imagine that, like a furry animal costume. And they have relations with each other. And so that's like their thing. Like they live their lives as a coyote or a dog or a cat or a pony or whatever. So that's what a furry is.
So is it like the Mandalorian where you don't take off your helmet? Like, is that, or like, is that,
I mean, to be honest with you, I've never personally met a furry, so I don't know what all the rules are. I'm assuming at some point they have to take the costume off because they have to go to the bathroom and stuff like that. And I don't think most furries, of course, I've never met one, but I would assume most of them, it's not a 24/7 thing. It would be, I mean, right?
like social gatherings?
Well, they have their, what they call their quote unquote fursonas, which I think is brilliant. This is too good. So they will interact with people as their fursona, but they can, I mean, you know, rule number one of being a mascot is you never take off the head. So I would imagine that they're trying to keep their fursona completely separate from their persona. So let's dive in. The furry movement, this is from the article, which grew up in the 1970s as part of the underground comic book world, engages in anthropomorphism, assigning human characteristics to animals, in their case by creating avatar-like representations of self called fursonas, and in many cases making costumes to match. So this article featured this guy, Hund the Hound. And the thing is the furry community tends to be pretty anti-religion, or at least mostly comprised of atheist and agnostic individuals. And you know, whatever, that's their deal. And Hund the Hound is a Christian furry, and he has a video called "Hund the Hound Meets Jesus Christ." And in the video, Hund is just kind of talking about his life and his hobbies, and he gets a little overwhelmed with his hobbies, and he hits his head, and he falls down, and he has a vision. And you're going to hear the vision, and this is what Hund hears.
Hello, furries. I am Jesus Christ, and you are watching Hund the Hound.
Wow.
So Hund is merging his furriness with his faithfulness, and I don't know. What do you guys think? I could talk about this all day long.
I couldn't.
I'm same. Is he trying to be funny, or is he really like into Jesus now?
Oh no, he said he is religious. He is actually a faithful Christian person.
What if the guy dressed up as Jesus is actually the guy?
Well, that's what I wondered. That's what I wondered, if Jesus Christ in the video
is him,
is Hund.
That's interesting. Because
it's a similar voice. So I don't know. I love this. I actually have a fursona.
Oh gosh.
And it's,
I was about to ask.
It's Tex the tortoise. And I'm like a tortoise with a southern drawl, like, hey y'all, you know.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't really think a tortoise is a furry though, because they don't have fur.
Well, it's anthropomorphic.
I think you've missed the point.
I'm a reptile.
Yeah, I mean,
you all are so uncomfortable right now.
No, I'm not uncomfortable. It just, people are just so weird that, I mean, it's just weird.
So if you were going to be a furry, what would be your fursona? Kyle, go.
Oh gosh, I don't even know.
Favorite animal and a name that goes with the animal. So like I'm Tex the tortoise.
I'll be Mike the monkey.
Okay, Mike the monkey. That yeah, sure. Okay.
You gotta what you do is you take your first name. So mine's Penny, and then you go penny penguin. Like you got to pick an animal that
See, I was
starts
going
with
to pick
your.
platypus for you.
There you go. Penny
Are you like in a
platypus.
club that you know these rules?
No, this is what you do in like classrooms to get kids to memorize other kids' names. Is you say pick an animal that starts with the first letter of your
come
name.
up with a fursona.
And so we all pick furry names, I guess. Is that
Kids, if you were going to be a furry, what would?
The issue is
Penny's
K,
no longer a teacher, by the way.
He's no longer in the classroom.
you wonder why?
koala. That's all I've got. I've got Kyle the koala.
It works.
That's cute.
Kangaroo.
That too.
Oh, it's kangaroo. Yeah,
It's just all Australia.
those things are very strong. Have you seen like the pictures of them flexing?
Yeah, see,
No, it's
that's
very
exactly
impressive.
why you should pick it.
I'm not strong.
All right, Jeremy.
Tony the tiger.
But that's not okay. Whatever.
Because you get all the cereal you want.
That's true.
And that's the best cereal.
I mean, Frosted Flakes are not the best cereal.
Oh, yes, they are.
Oh, I
Within 2 minutes, it's soggy and gross.
Well, that's
No,
why you eat it real
that's
You eat it
fast.
real
good.
quick. And then the milk tastes like the frosting.
I do love a good like the silt that settles at the bottom of the bowl.
Yeah.
Or the sugar. It's good stuff. All right. Well, so that if you were interested in diving into more about furries, there is a website called furscience.com, and it's philosophers and anthropologists / furry
Please,
Do you
furriest.
think like that their dream is just to work at Disney? Like to be a character or like at a Six
we know
Flags?
exactly what this is. It's a
Yeah.
fetish.
Oh,
so
it
please
is.
be careful Googling this.
Yeah.
So they
Probably
actually
don't Google furries.
Right.
So interestingly enough, they have tried to clean that image up a little bit, because a lot of them say no, it's not about sexuality. It is about it's not just about that. It's also about having a community of people who are like-minded, who feel other than because of where they are in society. So I don't want to say it's all.
So do you
based on
think? So
sexuality.
you think that the people that wrote the article that saying it's immoral to own pets are the same people that are furries? Because
Maybe
like is this like the same crowd?
it
Just-
could be.
Do you think they'd be friends?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But is it immoral to own a furry? I mean, have to be, right?
Send us your thoughts.
Goodness.
Email your thoughts, Kyle@journeyshepardsville.com
Yes.
about furries.
I'd love it.
It is just unreal. Like this is one of those articles where I'm just like, we have been given too much freedom. Like
I
as human
agree.
beings, like there's a reason we weren't supposed to have this much freedom.
I just wonder if Alan Hirsch, when he was talking about missional communities in the early 2000s, if this is what he had in mind.
Well, this has been around since the 70s.
I know,
so.
but he was big into missional communities and being, a Christian in these spaces. And I wonder if this is what he had in mind,
Well, I mean, I guess
or if he's just rolling.
if you want to like quote the Bible, these people are like, "Hey, Jesus, they're saying your name to cast out demons or whatever," and he's like, "Yeah, at least they're they're preaching. Let them preach." So, I guess let the furries preach. All right.
Didn't
Jeremy?
really preach. It was just that video was weird.
It
was
was. Yeah,
so
he really
weird.
just introduced himself. Hello.
I don't think Jesus would sound like that.
don't think so
but
either.
That's beyond the point.
All right. Well, that's fun. I was so excited when I came across that
I
article.
hope we see a furry at the state fair next week.
You probably will.
I would not shock me.
You probably will. I think we should look at the schedule, and if not, Tex the tortoise might make an appearance.
Oh,
I will not be showing up with that person.
it's not a person.
All right. Yeah, that's true.
It's a furry. I will not be
Good
showing up with
callback.
a
I like
furry.
that. All right. So there is an article that Russell Moore, he is the new editor at Christianity Today. He also he is the former head of the ECLA for the Southern Baptist Convention. I believe that's what it is, the Ethics and Civil Liberty Association within the Southern Baptist Convention. He left that. It was quite a shakeup, and he has been named one of the editors over at Christianity Today. And he wrote an article that it's a long article, but it's fascinating, and it's very appropriately titled "When the South Loosens Its Bible Belt." A growing breed of unchurched evangelicals is poised to heighten the culture wars. So we're going to talk about culture wars here in just a second, but I just want to talk about this article because technically, even though we're like the most northern tip of the South, where we are is still very much the South. And what they're finding is that the Christian community within the American South, it's changing quite a bit. And so I'm going to read a couple of excerpts that I pulled from the article just to kind of explain what he's talking about with this article. The kind of cultural Christianity we now see often keeps everything about the religious right except the religion. These people aren't in Sunday schools, but they might post Bible verses on Facebook or quote them on TikTok. Cultural Christianity, as we once knew it, is largely being replaced by a kind of blood and soil Christianity. The quote, Christianity in such settings is the sense of belonging and obligation, not to a church, but to a particular brand of white political and cultural identity. So essentially, what this article is talking about is people are keeping the evangelical label not as an identifier of their faith belief, but their political belief, and they are shifting the idea of what it means to be an evangelical, and it tends to be now largely not involved in a church community. Thoughts?
Yeah, I did think it was interesting when he talks about that you would think like the extremism, that the further you get isolated from the church, the more extreme you're actually becoming in some of your belief systems. And that makes sense because I think the church as a whole kind of keeps people grounded because it has become a place where, you have different viewpoints. And even in the Southern Baptist, I would say you have different viewpoints within a congregation, and it kind of keeps you, but the further you get from that, the more kind of extreme when you isolate yourself, kind of more of the extreme you get in some of your thoughts. So definitely an interesting article.
Yeah, there's a quote in there by Leon Weislier that whose ever identity is the thinnest tends to be the loudest, and that a lot of these individuals, they don't feel like they have an identity outside of their political leanings. What once used to be the church maintained their identity or helped them maintain their identity. Now that has gotten wrapped up in politics.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think like I know we're going to talk about in a second, but that one line, I don't know if you saw it, said to use the most trivial example possible at almost any other time in Southern Belt churches, older deacons and church ladies would give a stern reprimand to whoever uses the "Let's go Brandon" as a because I mean it's obviously a vulgarity thing.
yeah, right.
But now it's like just like accepted, it's just like so it's just like shifted, in this kind of culture thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of. It used to be the pastor would lead the flock, and now a lot of it is the flock leading the pastor because if you have a demographic. If you have a demographic, oh my gosh, I can't say the word.
Demographic?
Yes, thank you. If you have a demographic of people who lean to one way or the other politically, and you preach or teach something that does not align with their political thought, the reality is that they might just choose to leave. And there are implications for a large portion of people leaving your church because they don't agree with not just you politically, but even what the Bible says about how we should live and act in our world today. There was a thing recently where Donald Trump Jr.'s son, he gave a speech and he said, we know that Jesus said, we need to turn the other cheek, but let's be honest, what has that gotten us? We haven't won since we've been doing that. So
Yikes.
It's essentially this idea of like, well, let's just get rid of we can keep we're the religious ones, but we can get rid of like the actual Jesus following stuff. And that's very problematic.
So I grew up in a Baptist church, probably not as much Southern Baptist as you would see as you go further down south. But I will say this, growing up the way that we were told, like invite people to church, tell people about Jesus, knocking on doors, like that existed in the church that I grew up in. However, now we know that, I know that God calls different generations to do different things. That's just the way it is. But what we have now is online. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, where people feel the way that they should be telling people about God is through the internet. And that's a huge problem right now. And I think that's been discussed in the article, right? About how we're portraying Jesus or how we're telling people about Jesus through the way things we post online, thinking we're doing the right thing, but in reality, we're not doing the right thing.
Yeah. No, it talks about that these people aren't in Sunday school, but they might post Bible verses on Facebook or quote them on TikTok.
Yeah. And it talks about there being a difference between being a quote unquote confident Christian versus a combative Christian. And I want to read this excerpt real quick. There's a world of difference between confident and combative Christianity. Confident Christianity constantly reminds us that this life is less important than the next. It demonstrates something of what it means to forgive and serve one another and to be on mission together within a true, visible local body. Combative, quote, Christianity tries to differentiate us culturally, politically, or racially from those deemed to be the irredeemable enemies. Now, this is what I really like what it goes to next. This is especially true when people combine a sense of identity as an entitled majority, as an example, we are the real America, with an identity as a besieged minority. Elites are out to destroy us. A blood and soil mentality is the way of Cain, who resented his brother because he himself was not recognized. And this is the last section I'm going to read. True Christian worship is the way of Abel, who offered his sacrifice to God even though it cost him his life. Some might say, see, that's the problem. Abel ended up dead. Cain at least was a fighter. That makes sense from one point of view. The problem is that this isn't the perspective of Jesus, the Bible, or the church of the living God. So it's very much like people think that we need to be bullying each other into believing rightly about a whole, slew of issues. And that is just not a sustainable model for the church in America.
That's frightening, actually, to think of, as he had mentioned, creating what kind of real Christians are we creating? And I mean, that's not a good direction for us at all.
Well, I think that's the problem. I think that's the most confusing part to the people that are not in church is, there's a great book I read years ago, The Ones Who Eat Their Own. And it was talking about how we just devour each other as Christians and, denominationalism and obviously the Southern Baptists. And I know you grew up Southern Baptist, Penny, but like being in this area, I mean, there's a stronghold of Southern Baptist, especially with the seminary here and all this stuff. I mean, and it's, and even growing up in the historically like churches of Christ, I mean, churches of Christ believe if you don't get baptized in Church of Christ, you're not a Christian. Like, I mean, they actually believe that. And so it's like, now obviously we have gone way away from that kind of idea and thought. But I mean, just the way that we treat each other and talk bad about each other. And even with this, like, well, who's a real Christian and who's not, and if you try to be understanding and try to understand somebody else's worldview, whether you agree with it or not, I mean, now you're weak and now you're, I mean, it's just, I mean, it's just insane. It really is what we're doing to each other. And then we're like shocked that people don't want to be a part of it,
So not to get off subject, but where do you see the church in 100 years? Like, do you see a big change?
It depends on I'm not smart enough to predict that, but the guys that are predicting it right now, like the Ed Stetzers and the Carrie Newhoffs and even guys smarter than them, they are, the good news is the church is still growing. Okay. The bad news is white evangelicalism is not. And in fact, that's the scary thing for a lot of people is we are all in this room right now. We are white evangelicals. Now we don't really, and we've talked before, I don't really identify as an evangelical, but that's what we would be considered under. That is changing quickly. And so that is one of the concerns. So what they're talking about now, and we talked about this last week, and I'm trying not to get into politics, but we talked about last week. I mean, if you go to Europe right now, so for example, France was once considered the most religious country in the world. Now it's amongst the least. They're predicting, Australia, same way. There was a big religious movement in Australia, and I know that Hillsong comes from Australia, but the reality is most people in Australia are not religious at all. So they think that in 100 years, give or take, we're going to possibly be going in that direction because the great experiment, and especially the way people are going about it, is failing. And we're going to talk about this in culture wars here in a second, but we've lost the kingdom of God. We've lost what our goal is, and it's about control now, not about anything else. And so the guys, and I'm just saying that because these are the guys that I read and listen to, they are saying Christianity will continue to grow, but the thing that we've become familiar with will not be a part of that. And so that's one of the things that is concerning, I think.
Yeah, I think that in 100 years, we're already seeing this shift. Where Christianity is strongest, growing the fastest, sending out the most missionaries, has moved to the global South. So South America, Africa, parts of Asia, and we're seeing incredible numbers of people come into faith there. I think I agree with Jeremy that we are going to head the direction of your European countries and stuff like that, and we're going to see the United States be the recipient of more mission work from the global South. That's my prediction.
Hmm.
So it is concerning, but in some ways, it might be a necessary process for us to, focus again on what the kingdom is. I mean, it's not scary.
I wonder if it's a lot like growing pains, as if like we're growing out of a former version of ourselves and becoming a closer version of who God is calling the church to be at. It might be a little bit smaller and look a little bit different, but also at the same time, we might not have people that are incredibly divisive in the church that are saying things like, oh, if you vote this way, you're the worst kind of person. Or if you don't believe this part of it, you don't belong in this room. I wonder if we're moving away from something like that. That's what I look at.
I think a lot of them say it's going to get worse before it gets
Oh,
better.
for sure.
And that's the concerning part of this article, but also your question, Penny, is that almost everybody agrees it's about to get a lot worse than it's going to before it gets better. And so there's going to be more extremism, and they see that continuing. And to answer our next kind of segment or whatever, that's the concerning part, is what happens with this language that we're using with the extremes and stuff like that.
So let's jump into. We want to know what Jeremy thinks. So Jeremy, I want to ask you because we hear this topic a lot of the culture wars, and honestly, that I want you to define that for us, because that is such a common use phrase that I don't think anybody really knows exactly what it means. So should we, as Christian people, be fighting the culture wars? So let's hear.
What does Jeremy think?
So, I mean, even myself, I don't have a great definition for it. My best understanding of just the culture war here in America. So we could talk about culture war on the bigger scale between, the kingdom of God and the kingdoms of this world. But when we talk about culture war, so I mean, that's language that was actually created by Christians in the moral majority in the 70s and 80s. I mean, that's where that language comes from. I mean, I'm sure other people before them had referred to culture wars and stuff, but that's when it really took off, was the moral majority. And if you don't know much about the moral majority, you should study it. It was a failed experiment, and a lot of people got hurt, and a lot of people that were involved in it have since renounced being a part of it because it got so. And that's where I'll talk about just a second ago, the extremism. So that language of war, Ed Stetzer, who I love, he's kind of a missiologist and kind of looks into the future and studies the church. I mean, really studies the church and like numbers and charts and all this stuff. Kind of a nerdy guy. But he had this great quote recently. He said, "You can't war at people and reach them at the same time." And that is the bigger concern, is that if we think we're in a war, well, you can't reach people if you're in a war with them, So I think it's bad language to say we're in a culture war. The second thing I'm going to say, and this is the part we're not, and you all can push back on this. If there was a war, we've already lost. Like, we just lost. We are not going to change culture's views on sexuality. Even right now with, abortion and stuff like that, like we've talked about our feelings about abortion, and I've shared my feelings about, that I believe that it's this, but the reality is the majority of culture does not feel the same way that maybe we in this room feel or don't feel, it's just, we if there was a war, we've lost. I mean, I read recently an article, they were talking about that, and it was like, if there was this war, it would be like Puerto Rico all of a sudden deciding that they were going to attack America, even though they're a part of America. They're going to take on the full force of the U.S. military. Like, that's not a war. Like that's over in an hour. Like, it's 2 hours at best, So I think that's part of it, is to say, if we're in a culture war, is, and many Christians will say this, I mean, we've lost if there was a war. So I think that is part of it. I think the bigger thing now is, what do we do? Like, how do we still continue to influence people? Because I still think Christians can have influence in our country. I still think that people can have influence. And I don't, by any means, the kingdom of God is not going to lose. Jesus talks about that. It's not going to lose. Where I'm at is our strategy is off. Like, we're not doing well with our strategy of what we're trying to do. So culture wars is different things. I mean, unfortunately, and we talk about this, I mean, it's become political for a lot of people. There's obviously been the culture war with media, like you can only listen to, secular music versus Christian music, consuming Christian media versus secular media. So for some people, that's that kind of thing. but I would say we've lost that one as well. Kids today, I mean, they'd have no problem. I mean, we've even talked about shows that, I mean, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, if we were talking about we watched this show, like we would have lost our jobs. Like we would have, I mean, or we would have been called into somebody's office and be like, can you explain to me why you're watching Stranger Things? Because there's demon possession in that and, all this stuff. And, so all of that has changed in some ways. And I don't know how we go back, if we go back. I still think that people, and I'm aware of this, like I can still be influenced by things. And so I have to be careful myself sometimes what I watch, because I can become really cynical and jaded really fast. I can also even in language, like the more you expose yourself to certain words, and I have a whole thing on cussing. We won't get into that right now, but I can start using language that isn't probably very becoming of me, because I've allowed that stuff to like penetrate my heart and my mind and stuff like that. So I do think it's important that people understand that if there was a war, it's not good language, because you can't reach people if you think you're at war with them. I'd say the other side of that is that, part of it is the confusion, as we talked about just a second ago, for people. We're supposed to be the movement of love and hope and truth and all this stuff. And we seem to be the angriest and yelling at people. You go places and concerts. Even today, you'll still go to concerts and there's somebody out there with a bullhorn telling everybody that's going to the concert they're going to hell. Well, even if that's true, okay, maybe they are going to hell. That doesn't seem like a very effective strategy, for doing that. Christian media, like one of my things, like we gave April a hard time about what was that movie? What was
Redeeming
Redeeming
Love?
Love.
Redeeming Love?
Yes.
The reality is, I'm sure that somebody went into that saying, we're going to make this great movie and people are going to come to Jesus. No, everybody that went and saw that movie was in a women's small group at a church, or, that type of thing. That's just the thing, it's not like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's okay that they made that, but don't say that this is like your strategy of how you're going to save people. And I think that's where it gets confusing for people. And like, it's that we're offering you bread, but when you come in, we hit you with the rock type thing. And so I think that's just kind of where it gets confusing for people. And I think war is not a good terminology, so I don't think we should engage in it. But if there really is this war, I mean, for now, we've, in my opinion, we've lost. That doesn't mean that we can't still do things, but if the war mentality is what you're going for, it's not going well for us.
Yeah.
So I think, so if I can use this story, this is going to be one of the most famous stories I think about this is, the Beatles. And so if you're familiar with that story, when John Lennon said they were going to be bigger than Jesus and all this stuff, and everybody lost their stuff because of that. So it's older.
Wait, who are the Beatles? No, I'm kidding. Sorry.
Yeah. So there's a famous story that when they flew into Birmingham, Alabama, all of these like youth ministers took all their youth groups out on the tarmac and were burning their Beatles albums like as they're coming in. So, okay, so I don't know what point they were trying to prove, but they were, burning these Beatles albums, and it's like literally a couple years later in a Playboy magazine article, John Lennon talks about that during that time frame, that's when the song Help came out, and that it was actually he was looking for help, that he felt out of control and no one was there to answer him. And, one of the guy that I was reading this said, because we were too busy burning their albums, and it was like, here is people legitimately looking for help, but because we've made them our enemy in this cultural war. So of course, like, they come on this tarmac and all these youth group kids are saying these horrible things about them and burning their albums. And yet here is a guy that at that time may have had more influence than anybody in the world. And he's looking for help, but he's not going to turn to us because we've made him our enemy. Does that make sense? And I think that is the long-term kind of effect of this kind of idea of culture war. Does that answer it? I don't know. I mean, I kind of rambled a little bit, I guess.
No,
but
I mean, it's a really abstract topic.
it's hard to define what it is.
Right. And I think that, yes, you answered it. And gosh, I just think that we've confused reaching people with convicting people. And I think a lot of Christians have it in their minds that our job as Christians is to reach them by convicting them of their sinfulness. And even that is like, well, that's not our job. Our job isn't to convict anybody. Our job is to love them and do what we can to demonstrate Christ to them.
Yeah.
But if we get it in our hearts and our minds that my job is to show them how wrong they are, and even that, it's like, well, I mean, the church has not always been on the right side. The church in America, let's say it that way, has not always been on the right side of history. And
No.
I mean, there are lots of areas where the church has to like look at and say, oh, maybe we need to repent of this. We've hurt a lot of people. I mean, the civil rights movement was a perfect example of
Yeah.
that. And people in that time thought that they were fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
And so it's one of it's scary. Honestly, the culture war mentality scares me.
Well, and we started it. I
Yes.
think that's the part that maybe I didn't explain that well. Is if my understanding of it, the cultural war we started. Now you could say, well, so secular society started it because they started attacking our morals and values and all that stuff. Well, okay, I get that, but no, I mean we started this terminology of culture wars and stuff like that. And I think that I don't want to sound like we're defeated because I do believe the kingdom of God cannot be defeated. I mean, Jesus says even the gates of hell cannot stand up against it. But um, I think that we have a bad strategy, and I agree with you to like yell at people and first of all, the job of it's the job of the Holy Spirit to convict, not us. And we're also not the judge, people that don't believe. I mean, people get so mad when they're like, well, these people do these things. Well, they're not called to live the same way that we are. And so why are we getting mad? I almost feel like people, we talked about this before, I think on the podcast, like it's almost like we get mad at people because they're doing things we wish we could do. And so it's like, I get mad at them. You're going to hell because you're doing exactly what I want to be able to do, but I can't because I feel convicted. And so it's like, we get mad at them for something that and that gets confusing and really ugly, and I think a lot of the Christians that are making headway in the culture, are the ones that are, they're Christians, but they're not creating Christian media. They're working within the mainstream media and things like that, and I think too, there's also this, this whole mixtape series about this idea of can we find, ideas and divine and things that are secular, and I'm not saying, like I said, I'm never going to say that, Metallica was meant to be a Christian message song. It's not, but can we find truth in that? The other side of that is people that boycott things. I mean, that's the other side we haven't got into is we just boycott everything, which doesn't help. I mean, it doesn't do anything. And so when we do that, I think it confuses people because it just comes off like angry and petty to my understanding. And then the other thing I would say is that some people just don't consume secular media at all. And that's their like stand against, secularism and all that stuff. But I'll be honest with you, I watch a lot of TV, and in the past probably 10 years, there's no show that's made me want to be a better person and a better father than Bluey. And those people, that's not their intent. And it's a kid show. I get it. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, we can find things even in that are helping change things.
Yeah.
So.
I think that people push back against the idea that all truth comes from God, even if that truth didn't come from the Bible. I mean, there are things that we experience in this world that we have relationships with people, and we see things that happen just between humanity. And if it is good and it is true, well, that comes from God. Even if it doesn't maybe fit into our religious box, So a Muslim helping an atheist, that is goodness, and that comes from God, even
Right.
if we don't agree on belief. And I think that people really have a hard time with that.
I think the word cultural war is a really terrible, it's a bad label. Please don't use that out loud. I just think it's just doesn't need to be called war. It's a disagreement of ideas. And I will say this, Jeremy, I think a lot of people are probably going to disagree with you on your stand with that, because I think as a pastor, they want an answer. They want to know where they should come into play when it comes to the pandemic, vaccinations, I don't know, George Floyd, gay marriage, abortion. They want to know exactly where they should stand as Christians.
Yeah, and I think that's not so. When somebody says stuff like that to me, that's not my job. And I really do believe that because that is, George Floyd and vaccinations and all of that. Those things have gone outside the realm of right and wrong. I mean, and I'm not saying that we've made them outside that realm. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
We've made these political issues. We've made these issues, you can't even talk about it because somebody's going to get upset. And, my job, the way I see it is, first of all, when I've talked about, I don't debate people anymore. Like even, you could 100% disagree with me on my view on culture wars or whatever. And you could write me the email and I'd be like, huh, well, that's interesting. I don't need you to think I'm right. That's not my job. I don't care if you think I'm right. You know, I just want to be able to speak. And this is, like I said, everything. And I've always said, this is my opinion on these things. Now, the moral majority thing, that's factual. Like you can look that
Right.
up. Like they're the ones that started using that language and all that stuff. But, I think that people have to um, figure some of this stuff out on their own. And I think that's part of the problem is they don't. I think part of that is, and what I mean by figure it out on their own, I mean that
They need to stop regurgitating the talking points
yes,
they
they need
heard
to
on the
stop
news.
regurgitating. And people will debate me. And, I made a post last year during the vaccination about wearing masks. And it wasn't a political statement. It was a statement of, the ugliness of things I'm seeing post and all this stuff. And I even like talked about Jesus and quoted some verses. Well, I got like 50 people like all upset about that, like wanting to talk to me about it. And not one of them like could even like really articulate a response to that in a biblical format. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
and so me, it was like my approach to this is a love your neighbor type of thing. This is we should do, I don't care what you feel about it. This is, and that is a biblical concept of love your neighbor, put the needs of your neighbor before yourself, put the needs of those around you before yourself. And they couldn't even like talk about that because it was like they didn't have language for it, they didn't have ideologies for it. And I think that is one of those things where it's like for me, I don't know if that's answering or I'm just babbling at this point, but you see what I'm saying? Like I
No, I
mean
agree with you. I
yeah,
just meant people are going to expect something out of you because of who you are.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
and we as a society, we have got to relearn how to agree to disagree
Agree.
and continue to be in community with one another.
right,
We all have family members that we don't agree with on things. Even amongst our spouses, sometimes it's like, well, we don't agree on this
It's
thing.
because I'm always right.
Well, you and Terry can disagree about that. But it's this idea of we have to learn that we don't have to be in 100% agreement on everything all the time. That's not realistic.
well,
for
and I
one.
think so. Let me make this point. This is probably my better way of answering that now that I've gathered my thoughts. What I think about some of these things now is completely different than I thought 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And for me, that's the evolving of my understanding of God and what God wants of me and expects of me. And so the reason sometimes I don't make definitive statements, even though I know what people want, is because I don't want to screw you up. Because sometimes I'm willing to admit that this is a growing experience for me, but there are people that will still quote things to me that their pastor told them 25 years ago. And I'm like, surely your faith has grown in 25 years. Surely your understanding of the world has grown in 25 years. And so I think that is why sometimes I don't want to make some of these definitive statements does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Because, because here's the thing. I I participated in things 20 years ago, growing up in church 25 years ago, because at the time I thought that was right because my pastor told me to, or this is what the church is doing, or I remember going outside. I mean, this is true. I remember going outside abortion clinics and holding up signs because that's what our church did. And now 25 years later, I'm going, well, that was the wrong thing to do. Like we did not need to be there doing that because that wasn't helping. That
Right.
didn't change anything. That made us feel good in the moment. And I think that sometimes with these culture war things is that people, they want to have these little like, and I think they want to have these little like victories, but we're losing the war, and
Right.
you might be right, but you lost the people that you could have had influence over. And to me, that's the bigger thing with all of this is, yeah, I might be right. I can make a statement right now about some of these things and I might be right, but I just turned somebody off, and I think that is the bigger thing. And that's why,
And
Yeah.
you just said your thought process might change.
oh yeah,
And so you've now made a statement that person, well, now I write Jeremy off because I disagree with him
Yeah.
about this. Well, then your mind changes about something, and that doesn't matter now because they've already written you off
Right.
for not agreeing with them.
So going back to, the culture wars, and if we've lost it, I wonder, not to use another war as an example, but I wonder if we've lost it, so how do we have like a successful retreat, not let it be like a Vietnam thing where we're stuck around.
Well,
and
so when I say we lost the war, I'm not sure that's a bad
Yeah.
thing. And what
Yeah,
I mean
no,
by
I
it's a
don't
bad
think
thing
so
is
either.
I don't know we should have been in a war.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's where I'm sitting there going, so that when I say that I still want to see the kingdom of God prevail in America, what I'm
Yeah.
saying is this specific, so yeah, I think that there are ways we need to re-strategize how this strategy didn't work.
Mhm.
We didn't change America. We lost America, if anything.
Yeah.
And so, I'm with you. Like, okay, so the conversations I do want to have, I don't want to talk. I mean, we're talking about I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah.
What I want to talk about is, okay, what can we do?
Mhm.
What are the new strategies? What are the ways we can actually be like Jesus? I think that, and I've always said this, there are certain people that will always be turned off by Jesus because the idea of God existing gets to them. The idea that, God came through in the form of Jesus, they're not going to get on board with that. But I'll always stand by most people that I talk to don't have a problem with Jesus. It's us they have
Yeah.
a problem with. And I think that is the overarching thing. Okay, how do we change that to where now not only they're open to Jesus, but they're even open to us,
Mhm.
and because we are it's a package deal.
Yeah.
If you have Jesus, you're going to have his bride. And the bride here has not done a good job of being, that.
And it's one of those things too. The early church never defended the church. Well, the early church always defended the church. They never defended God because God can prove himself. It's
Right.
always defended themselves. They didn't defend because God can prove himself. They was defending, okay, how do Christians live in a world where we have this standard, but we don't live up to it? And how do we still be loving and walk through that standard and have people see it as well?
Well, and I would think too, the early Christians, and maybe this is where we're going to go in 100 years, like we talked about. The early Christians didn't consider it a war because they knew they'd lose.
Mhm.
They couldn't take on Roman culture. Rome ruled the world. Like, you're losing. So that's that idea of they came from the ups. They came from, below. I mean, they were
Mhm.
never in a place of power. And I think where this gets off track is we have been in a place of power, and now we feel like that power is being stripped from us. And I'm not so sure that's a bad thing,
Yeah.
that it's being stripped from us, and that if there really is going to be a real, I hear people talk about like revival and all that stuff. Okay, well, maybe the real revival is we lose everything,
Yep.
and we have to now actually, here's the thing, be dependent on
Mhm.
God, because we don't have the power anymore. We don't have the buildings and that we could get to that place. And, you can build here. We've gone too long, but you can build a successful church. You can build a big building. You can have a prominent thing. And God may or may not be a part of that, to be honest with you, in our culture now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There are guys that are highly, and I'm not saying, we talk about what's his name, the guy in Tennessee that's just
Oh yeah, Greg Locke.
off his. He's got a big church.
Yeah.
He's got a nice building. He's got, dude, this guy is speaking nothing that is, in my opinion, of God or from Jesus, and he's one of these guys it's a culture war, and
It is much easier to have a successful ministry if Jesus has no part of it. Like, and that's just
that's true.
it's a lot easier to have success with people and with growing things in bringing in lots of money and fame and all that if Jesus isn't part of the equation. Because a lot of people, like Jeremy just said, Jesus is a hang up. And he's a hang up because he wants me to lose everything to gain. He wants me to serve and not be served.
So I made an observation, and we're getting to territory maybe we shouldn't get into, but I made an observation. Some of the churches that this is the thing for them. Notice they're almost always going to preach from the Old Testament. And then they're going to skip over a lot of Jesus stuff, and then they're going to say some stuff that Paul maybe wrote
in Revelation.
But because that's the war.
Mhm.
The Old Testament was bloody, and it is a war. And then you get into Revelations, and even,
Revelations.
Revelation. Yeah. And so it's, and I always shorten it. I did that in Bible college too, drove my pressure crazy. But, but I do think that is a thing. Like, you can find a lot of those messages, and you don't, but you skip over Jesus, because Jesus, I don't know, he says a lot of things that I don't like, but they're true.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, let me give you a quick rundown of what's happening here at Journey. We've talked a long time, so we're gonna skip our last little segment, and we'll save that for next time. But we got a lot going on here. PACs are kicking back off. Signups are live. They will begin starting Sunday, August 28th. You can sign up now on the app. September 9th, the students are going to activate games. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to Kyle at journeyshepardsville.com. Fall Fest is September 24th. It's a Saturday. It's a new location we're really excited about. It's going to be at the park, First Street Park. Is that correct, Jeremy? First Street
Yes,
Park?
right across the street from the building.
And we are really, really excited about the fact that we're going to get to do it over there, and just gives us a whole lot more room to operate. And so come out that day from 4 to 7. We'll talk more about that as we get closer. For everything else, be sure to download the Journey app. All right. Anybody else have anything they want to say before we sign off?
We're looking for vendors still for our Fall Fest. So if you know someone and they're interested in selling or being a part of that, please reach out to Casey.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, that'll do it for our episode today. We will talk to you soon. So long, and thanks for all the fish.